Den här gäller inte här i Sverige. Den här... Låt den brinna! Sverige är mitt land nu. Okej? Jag kan offra mitt blod på Sverige. Så håll käften du, som pratar mycket. Okej? Mitt blod. Jag kan offra den på Sverige. Håll käften. Håll käften, din profet. Han är kidnappare. Han har haft sex med ett barn. Han har dödat många. Han har dödat någon. Okej? Som är 60 år. En gubbe på 120 år som heter Abu Adik. Okej, han hade skrivit lite ord till Muhammed. Han skickade någon som tog en svärd och han stoppade svärdet mitt i hans lever och tog ut hans lever också. På grund av han sa till Muhammed, du är inte profet. Ditt Qur'an nu, du ser vad de har vad det gäller inte i Sverige. Ta den till någon annanstans. Den här är atombomb på jorden. Den här är mer än atombomb. Ja, jag vill bara säga någonting. Sociala barn, era soner på grund av att ni slår dem. Vet du? Vad tar socialen dina barn? Ni slår dem, ni kan inte behandla dem som är bra. Som Sveriges lag säger. Du slår dina barn, okej?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is 15 after 9 o'clock South African time. We're crossing over to Sweden and we are going to be talking with Professor Emin Poljarević. He's the Associate Professor, Department of Theology and Sociology of Religion at Uppsala University based in Sweden. And of course, we were viewing a clip of that horrific incident of the burning of the Qur'an in Sweden. It is an act of absolute stupidity and madness is what I say. However, the burning of the Qur'an or any other holy text is an offensive and disrespectful act and a clear provocation. This is what the Swedish Foreign Ministry has said. But at the same time, they go on to say that the ministry says that constitutionally protected rights to freedom of assembly, expression and demonstration. So as far as I'm concerned, they're speaking with a forked tongue. Let's hear what Professor Emin has to say about the situation. Assalamu alaikum to you, Professor. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Obviously, we as Muslims all around the world are absolutely outraged. We see this as an act of Islamophobia. But at the same time, I'm wondering if we should even give such isolated incidents. I'd like to think and pray that it is isolated incidents by these provocateurs, because really what they're wanting is name, fame and glory by doing this. Should we even be giving them coverage at all in the media? Your thoughts?
Well, that's a good question, and I think the media outlets have a collective responsibility, really, to be selective in what they are covering, right? So that's a very good question. I think more media outlets would have to kind of think about. But so let's say theoretically, this type of incidents or manifestations or just stunts are there to provoke reaction, obviously, right? This would not have been interesting for these people who are committing such acts at all if they did not get any reaction. So if this was happening in forests outside of Stockholm, that no one would really react, or it would be no attention given to it, and in that sense, it would just pass without any influence, right? But since this is a highly charged and political situation in Sweden, in a context of heightened tensions between, let's call it immigrants or people of immigrant background and ethnic Swedes, or in the context of right-wing politics, this becomes a very, very charged situation. And in the light of Swedish application to join NATO alliance, this becomes even more part of global, if you wish, or rather regional politics in Europe.
The last known incident, the Qur'an burning incident, was by the other madman, Paladun. This time around, it's a brown person, an Iraqi citizen living in Sweden. His name is Salwan Momika. He stomped on the Holy Qur'an and set several pages alight. What is his story? What do we know about him? Clearly, he can't be Muslim by birth. And obviously, also, not all people from the Middle East are Muslim. There are non-Muslims from the Middle East as well.
Yes. So what we know about him is that he comes from Iraq, and he came with a recent wave of migrants from that country, a Christian background. I believe he's also a Chaldean Christian who seemingly joined military units, which fought the voluntary military units, which fought ISIS in northern Iraq during from 2014 and 15, and they were in alliance with Muqtada Sadr's unit, military units, which also were volunteers fighting ISIS. So it was part of that, let's say, those groups, right? But again, this is just his background. I don't think you can generalize too much from this, but we can definitely see that this man acts on his own. I don't think there are no indications, at least what I've seen in the media and elsewhere, there's no indication of any organized group, but he definitely plays into hands of xenophobic and Islamophobic forces and individuals and groups which exist in Sweden and elsewhere.
The Swedish government has said that the burning of the Quran or any other religious text is an offense, and it's disrespectful and clear provocation. It's also an expression of racism. So they say xenophobia and related intolerance. They go on to say has no place in Sweden or in Europe for that matter. That's what the Swedish Foreign Ministry has put out. But at the same time, they also go on to say that constitutionally, this person or these type of people with this type of crazy thinking has a right to freedom of assembly, expression, and demonstration. How do you view that? It's almost, speaking with a forked tongue, or it's almost, I guess, the one statement kind of nullifies the other. Doesn't quite make sense to me.
Well, yeah. So we have to be. It's a complicated statement in the sense of it's given in the light of several different contexts. You have this secular context in liberal context in terms of the Swedish so-called constitutional basic law, and then you have other types of more normative contexts which are definitely tied into nationalism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia, broadly speaking. So there are several layers there. What happens with this statement from the Prime Minister's mouth is that it is really a speculation, because the highest court, the Supreme Court in Sweden, has not tried this type of act. Is not have any legal opinion so far. Only the lower courts have been giving these verdicts that this is allowed under the Constitution. So the highest court in Sweden has actually not had opportunity, or maybe they had opportunity, but they were not considering this under their jurisdiction, so to say. So there is a limitation of free speech in Sweden, and the hate speech or hate crime is illegal according to the law. And this has to do with three different criteria. The hate crime or hate speech in Sweden is illegal based on three criteria: on the intent of the person who is doing this, right? On the statement or message that the person tries to convey. And the third one is to threaten a group of people, and so on and so forth. So I'm obviously not a legal expert, but I think there is a huge reason here for Supreme Court or highest court in Sweden to try these acts of hatred and Islamophobia. But that has not happened so far. So on the one hand, the Prime Minister is right, saying this is not illegal thus far, but at the same time, the highest court has not had any opinion on this as of now.
I understand that countries like Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Morocco, etc., have summoned the Swedish ambassadors in protest at the Qur'an burning incident. We also know that President Erdogan from Turkey has condemned it outright, saying that it is absolutely unthinkable that this mad person was given the rights to carry out this act. But be that as it may, do you believe that things will change because there's pressure from other governments that these type of incidents don't take place in the future in Sweden?
Well, yeah, that's a so-called empirical question in the sense that Sweden is a relatively small North European country and is very sensitive to outside pressure, and it's a very export dependent country. So when Muslim countries are threatening to take action against it, it's definitely something that Sweden feels internally as well, and it feels the pressure. So it is seldom that Muslim majority countries would unite under any question, right? If you think about the history of Organization of Islamic Conference or cooperation, we don't see that kind of common front. But here it may be a question where Muslim majority countries can come together and put pressure on Sweden, Swedish government, its constituency by simply giving them a sign or taking some type of action, diplomatic action, which can maybe limit this type of act or condemn them, or even legally take some legal actions against such act.
Professor, what comes to mind now is the riots in France at the killing of the Muslim teenager by a police officer. And I'm wondering if a situation like this, the burning of the Quran, is not provocation and agitation against Muslims and ethnic groups, because this could spiral out of control, could it not? And lots of lives could be lost in innocent lives could be lost in the process as well.
Yes, so this type of acts and the actions need to be taken into consideration when we think about the charged situation in many European countries, including France and Sweden, where extreme right politicians and groups and social movements are really creating tensions against actually a tiny minority of Muslims, if you consider the entire Europe. And usually Muslims in these countries are disadvantaged economically, politically, culturally, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, the situation is highly volatile, and I believe there is a lot of reason for concern, maybe not immediately, but in a midterm period, and a long period essentially, where Muslim lives and minorities are threatened to the point where we can see religious tensions or political tensions, even racial tensions, which are now flaring up in different places in Europe, and that's highly unfortunate. I mean, just a little over 100 years, we've seen that the Jewish minorities in Europe have suffered relentlessly, and this violence from fascism and xenophobia and anti-Semitism, it's kind of, this is reminiscent of that period in my view, if we just take a longer historical view, and hopefully it will not develop to that level as 100 years ago, but there's a risk of such development.
I'm wondering how we as Muslims around the world should be responding to isolated incidents of Quran burning. And early on, I did suggest that perhaps the media shouldn't be giving it the attention, because this person might simply be attention seeking and hopefully align himself to the right wings in the different European countries. But we as Muslims, should we be giving them people like the mad people like these? Should we be giving them a platform at all? Should we ignore it? What is the sense, how do we sensitize ourselves against such painful situations where we see non-Muslims desecrating our holy book, our Qur'an al-Kareem, in this way?
Oh, that's an extremely difficult question to answer, but I think part of the answer is for Muslims in various places, in both in Europe and elsewhere, to organize and to create manifestations of alternative sort. That means where they spread the knowledge and perhaps even organize vigils and so on and so forth, right, on that kind of social level. And also to be cognizant of the political situation, and also a media logic, which kind of is going after this kind of sensationalism that is created by these acts, and they obviously want viewers. So we have a very paradoxical situation where Muslims don't want this to happen, but at the same time they are part of the world in which we live, and they are also very active in social media and elsewhere. So I think the least we can do as individuals and small collectives is to create awareness about the Quran and its message, and also to apply it to our own lives, I suppose, and spread it elsewhere. That's the least we can do, but that's only the part of the kind of answer that is very very broad, I think, and I'm afraid I cannot. I'm not competent enough to give you any better response than that.
Alhamdulillah, here in South Africa and all around the world, we do know, but particularly in South Africa, I do know that we have a huge majority of young people, youngsters, that are studying to become Hafizul Quran. And for me, that is very, very comforting, knowing that as many printed Qurans that mad people like this Iraqi and Paladun go about burning all around the world, or may decide to do so, they'll never be able to take away this knowledge, because it's embedded in our psyche. It's embedded into the hearts and minds of our young people. And as many Qurans as these people try to burn and try to, to possibly agitate us as Muslims, they'll never take that away from us, from our psyche and our young people going forward, inshallah. Any comments on that before we wrap up?
Well, yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, this is a one individual or handful of individuals who are doing such things, and I believe that the message of the Quran and Muslims living up to its standards, its message, its guidance, right, is the best way to respond to such xenophobic and Islamophobic acts. Absolutely.
Alhamdulillah. Professor Emin Poljarević, Associate Professor, Department of Theology and Sociology of Religion at Uppsala University in Sweden. Thank you indeed for your insights and your time. We do value it and appreciate it very much. Go well. Keep us in your du'as, inshallah.
Thank you, and you likewise.
It is exactly 9:32 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. Next, we are going to be talking with Riza Amra. He is a partner at Turning Point Chartered Accountants in South Africa, and going to be sharing some interesting and important news with us on the show this morning.